Alright, I am back from my 2-week vacation and ready to make another video. I got back a few days ago and I had noticed a couple of comments that I gotten on exactly how I make my shims for these fixed pilot conversions. So what I do, to start off, I'll take the pilot, I'll remove it from the truck, and I'll cut off those two flanges or whatnot that have the screw holes where they attach to the pilot, or to the truck, I mean. Once I get those cut off, I'll take and I'll look at a whole bunch of different pictures online of actual real locomotives that are, I usually try to go by the road name, so if I'm doing a Union Pacific locomotive, I'm looking at a Union Pacific model, or the actual Union Pacific online, because every different road name has different details and whatnot that they do. So in this case, this is a Union Pacific SD40-2, so I first did a search for 9883. Well, 9883 is, actually I think it was scrapped, but or used for parts, but it didn't have the dynamic brakes. It didn't have, it had, no, I guess it didn't have sun visors. I don't know. It was pretty stripped down, the pictures that I found of it. So I ended up just looking at a Union Pacific SD40-2 that looked like this model that I have right here. So when I do that, I will look for things, mainly when I'm doing the trucks. What I'll look at is the bottom of the truck side frames to the bottom step on the pilot, and I'll get that as close as I can to the actual thing and measure that distance. What I have, I'll kind of set it up here like this, hold the pilot up where it needs to be, and then measure the distance that I have so I know how thick of a shim I need. Once I get that, I will make the shim. Now, the material that I use for the shims are right here. This is 0.04 inch styrene, and somewhere around here I have 0.02. So I have this and half the thickness of that. So to me, 0.02 inches is within reason for me to make a shim. So in this case, this took 0.08 inches to make the shims on this locomotive. So what I did was I cut two pieces of shim that were, I took the pilot and I laid it right on the piece of styrene, and I just cut out a square of where that pilot was. Now that too big, obviously, and I cut two pieces like that and glued them together. So then I had my shim, the right thickness that I needed. Then what I did was move back a step. I then, after those were glued together, laid the pilot so that the top side was facing on the thing, and kind of traced a rough outline of what I needed. I then glued the shim to the pilot and used a whole bunch of these, well, not a whole bunch, actually only 3 or 4 different files here. Now, this file, I don't know if you can tell on video or not, but it's just a square file, and I have a couple of different sizes. So I have this one that's really small for once I get it down to within, like, super close and I just need to file out a little bit, I'll use this. What I mainly use is this guy, and it's a little bit bigger of a file. If we can see that, there we go, it's kind of focusing now. But it's, again, just a square file, and it has a little bit more aggressive grit than this file does, so it can take stuff down just a little bit faster. The other tools that I use to scrape it away, I have the Dremel, and then I also have, right over here, I have the X-Acto knife. Try to get that on screen. I have the X-Acto knife with a whole bunch of different style blades. I could actually get a couple of those here. Maybe not. Oh, the workbench is such a mess. But anyways, there's some blades that come out and they're just squared off, flat, and all that kind of stuff. Bunch of different blades for this come in handy. And then also these guys right here. This is a triangular file, really small again, like roughly the same size as this guy, the small file. And then this, which is a super flat, like a thin, flat file. Let's see if I can get that a little bit better. Right there. It's like a, I don't know, really flat, which is good for getting the fronts of locomotives, like along the front. So once I get all that fine tuned and everything, while it's on the glued onto the pilot, I'll then, once I get it where I want it, the shim exactly fit to size, everything shaved down where I want it, I will then glue it to the shell, to the body of it. So when I glue them, I use, well, let's see if I have it around here somewhere. I think I actually just used model glue this time because it's all plastic that I was, well, besides the pilot, but the pilot glued well with this too, this stuff as well. It's just the Testors cement for plastic models. It actually worked on this metal that they used for the pilot. So I glued all that together, clamped it, let it sit overnight, and get it, nice and dry so it's not going anywhere. And then I take, so you can't see it now, but I think in a previous video I showed it. I take off this decking, or the, whatever you want to call it, the grit. This whole thing comes off in a sheet, and you're down to the plastic shell. I'll drill 2 holes through the frame down from the top, so through the shell just like this, 2 holes, countersink them, and put screws in. Then what I do is I take a screw that's too long and run it through there, so that when you get done, you can kind of see there's that silver mark, and if I can get the right lighting here, there's another one on that side. So those 2 screws, I'll just cut off with a Dremel, cut them flush, and then that way I know that the screw is all the way through the pilot, the shim, and the frame. Once I get that done, I'll actually glue the screws before I put them in too, so that it's kind of like a Loctite, so that I know that they aren't going to back out, they aren't going to move anywhere. So the pilot, the shim, and the shell are glued, and the screws are glued all the way through the pilot, the shim, and the shell. So everything is glued and screwed, and I can lift this thing up by this pilot, no problem. I know it's not going to go anywhere. It is permanently in place. Now, once I get that done, I'll put my decking back on, and you can't even tell if those screws are there. So, making the shim look decent on these models is sometimes easier said than done. Especially on these MTH SD40-2s. There is no, I don't know about the newer ones. This is an old Protosound 2 model. It's actually got a 5-volt board in it still. So it's like from 2003 or 2004. I think this was like one of the first releases with Proto 2 in it. It's very old. It's like 20 years old already. Anyways, there are no, I don't know if you can see that or not. There's no drainage holes. There's no step detail. Nothing. It's just all cast in, and really doesn't look the greatest. I think I had a question about making the steps look decent. What I did was to try to make it a little bit better. I actually notched out a step width. That's my shim there, that notched out part. So it kind of made it like 3D a little bit. I did that on, both sides, obviously. So that part that's notched out right there is where that shim is. I just tried to make it look as good as I could. These MTH SD40-2s, the shells aren't exact. The steps, you can see how they're kind of squared off. In real life, I think this side over here kind of has an angle to it. Kind of like, actually I have my SD45 shell right here because I'm doing work on it. You can see how this part is kind of angled in, and then this side is squared off. The very outside edge is squared off, and this other side, it kind of has that angle to it. Some of these older models, older tooling and stuff, they're not always perfect. So this is a good example of kind of just making it work with what you have. Make it work with the model, make it look good with the model, and that's about all you can do, unfortunately. I was hoping that when Atlas took over, they would make more of a, and we'll see, I guess, maybe they changed the tooling, used a little bit different shell or something, I don't know. But as far as I can tell, it was the same tooling as MTH used for their Atlas O Premier stuff that they got from MTH. So I'm going to wait on their SD40-2. I'm hoping that they make a 2-rail model of it, make my life a little bit easier, and just go with the fixed pilots right away. Any chance that you can, if you're a person that's into fixed pilots, go ahead and buy the fixed pilot model, especially with the MTH models, because you can get the high rail wheels, and I might actually have a set of those for sale sometime soon if anybody wants them, because I took them off my SD45 that I'm doing. Anyways, so kind of just making it work with the model. The steps, again, are not perfect, and you can see I have a little bit more painting to do here. I have to put those white stripes back on, the safety stripes or whatever they're called, highlight for the top of the stair, kind of like what is on the front end here. You can see those stripes. I gotta paint those back on, and yeah, I mean, just really making it work with the model. Let's see, what else? Oh, what all? Let's. Do I have a good view of it here? I'm gonna try to push this camera up a little bit. Let's see if we can get a view of this. This model had, some rear detail up in here. Well, on the real thing, that was all just closed off. Get a better view of that. There. So I just put a piece of styrene in there to make it so that it's all flat. The other thing that I do, I use this right here, this putty. It's made by Squadron Products. I think I mentioned this in a previous video as well. Once I get those pilots glued and screwed on, I'll go and I'll just fill those gaps between the pilot and the shim and the shell. I'll fill those up with putty. It just makes it look a little bit neater, and it makes it, that shim, just a little bit more invisible. This one I didn't get entirely perfect, but you can kind of see, you can't really tell where that shim is. especially if you're, the train's going by you at any sort of speed, you're not going to be able to tell that that's a shim. I put quite a bit of this stuff in, and then I'll sand it down. It's sandable. I'll put it in, let it dry a day, and go back and sand it down, and make it all nice and pretty, like they say. And it really helps with the effect of it just being that it wasn't ever not attached to the shell. So I'd recommend using this for just that little bit more. It takes a little bit longer, and you do have to paint, which if you're doing anything other than a Milwaukee Road or something that has black, you're gonna have to paint anyways, because styrene doesn't come in Harbor Mist Gray, which is the color that I have here. If you're looking for a good set of paints too, this True Color paint, I'd really recommend it. Especially if you have an airbrush, because it comes ready for airbrush use. You have to shake it up, and it's pretty liquidy, pretty thin, so it's ready for an airbrush. Anyways, I think I'm going to cut this video off here. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I know that not a lot of people are into fixing pilots on models, especially if they're into 3-rail. A lot of guys just don't care about the swinging pilots and stuff. Me personally, I like the look of non-swinging pilots, so I'm gonna do the models that I have, and then I'm just gonna start buying the models that are 2-rail, quote unquote, and I'm actually thinking about leaving them as 2-rail. Still keeping my 3-rail stuff, obviously, but do a loop of 2-rail. Anyways, yeah, if you have any more questions, like I said, leave them down below. I'm here to help as best I can. If I ever do this again, I'm thinking I'm gonna document the whole thing and maybe do a time lapse of a bit of it, just to show better on what I do and exactly how I do it. Obviously, the process takes a little while. It's not. I mean, making the shims could take a night and an afternoon. After dinner, you go down and you just start working, and it does take time. And I just take my time on it because I want it to look nice, and quite frankly, I have other trains to run while this is in the shop or on the workbench. So to me, it doesn't matter necessarily how long I take to do this on my own stuff. Yeah. Anyways, I hope this was helpful to the people that care to watch. Like I said, I know not everybody is into this. It's kind of a niche spot in the O-scale stuff, because O-scale is the only ones that have swinging pilots, really. So if you're in any other scale, this is really not relevant. But yeah, it's all about just looking at pictures and getting the details right and going from there. So I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, like and subscribe and comment. Let me know if this is the type of video that you want to be watching, and if it's helpful. I'm hoping that these videos are just helpful to people that need them, because I know I'm just learning as I go. There isn't much out there on this. There's pictures of people that have done it, but not really the process of it. So I'm just kind of learning as I go and doing the best that I can. Yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.